Yes, folks, it's Thursday. I'm Fred McMurray. It's 4 p.m. Central, which means this has to be. Howdy, ma'am.
Hello, Fred. How are you?
It's good to be back in the office after the last couple of weeks.
It is good to see you there. And we are super excited to bid you all a happy Friday Eve. We've got a great show for you today. However, we have lots of people on vacation. Apparently, this is the day that everybody takes off for the long holiday. I didn't get that memo.
I didn't either.
I don't know how I got the short straw today, but we are here ready to bring you a great show and an amazing guest today. So I'm super lucky to be the one chosen to do this show. And we'd like to remind you all that this is Pillars of Franchising, your number one resource for franchising success. And our call-in number today is 323-580-5755. You can tell this is usually Elizabeth's job to go through the phone number. So bear with me today in the event that I have a hiccup, because normally it's Elizabeth. So welcome to the show. And Fred, you and I get to do word on the street today.
Okay. I'm primed for it because the last week or so, I spent my time with a crime-fighting superhero. I'll let.
And there she is. Awesome. So let's talk about Denver University.
Yeah. Are you talking about the folks, I'm going to screw the name up. I always do. The Linigers who founded, I think it was Remax?
Yes, I am. So great news on them. First of all, let me say, because we have such great guests on the show today, they are a Hall of Famer in the International Franchise Association as Remax franchisors. And then they also started Motto Mortgage. And what makes them amazing people is that they have decided to give back to franchising into into Denver University, rather, $3 million to help fund a franchise program for students and people who would like to go in and learn more about franchising.
$3 million is not bad. That's a nice chunk of change.
Well, in my eyes, I think any amount that you can give to people to help make them more educated about investing in their future, especially something like buying a business, starting a business. But obviously, if you're going to make a really big mark, the more money you have, the better. And I think Denver University is very lucky to have such great donors there. And I'm sure they're going to contribute heavily in terms of some of the curriculum and things of that nature. We know that Palm Beach Atlantic has the Titus Center for Franchising down there, and there are a couple other schools that do that. And I have to give a shout out to these universities, because it wasn't that long ago, back in the 80s, that it was kind of a lick and a prayer, and you could go buy a franchise, right?
80s wasn't a long time ago?
Well, I still listen to 80s music, so was it? It doesn't.
It feels like it. So let me ask you a question about this. Given that you have, in your career as a franchisee, encountered all 5 of the pillars. You haven't gone to the goal of the pillars, which is to transfer the opportunity to somewhere else. So I won't quiz you on that. But out of the 5 pillars areas, what topic, or 2 topics would you think that these franchising schools, we'll put it that way, are least discussed, least informed about? What should they be saying? These are things you need to know that most won't learn, or will only learn the hard way?
Well, I think that, and I have to preface this by saying I'm not speaking from an educated point of view because I have not seen the curriculum. So I don't want to say this and be criticized for being wrong because I very well could be. Okay, so I have to preface it by the fact that I have not seen the curriculum. However, if I had to guess, I would say that they are probably light on culture and they are probably light on giving back to the community. Because if I had to guess, the initial curriculum is probably more focused on nuts and bolts, funding, qualifying, what franchise fits best, how do you find the right one, how do you do the due diligence, all of that kind of stuff, as opposed to the soft skill stuff, which I always feel like kind of gets to the side, right? Like it's not as important.
All right, so with that first one, you just made Ray's year.
Well, again, it's an opinion. I can't say, but now I'm going to have to dig in and check it out.
Okay, so you made Ray's year with the culture word. So here I was thinking it was something oddball like hiring or whatever. What do I know? I'm just the marketing guy. It's all good. Should we get to our guest, or do you have any other word on the street?
No, I got to tell you, we need to get to this guest because he is a very busy man, and we're very fortunate to have him on the show today, and I want to respect his time. And with that, I'll introduce the president and CEO of the International Franchising Association, Mr. Matt Holler.
Of which we are both members.
Yes, we are.
So, not just members, active members, which we greatly appreciate. You get out of IFA what you put into it. So thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'd like to read Matt's bio. This is Matt Holler, and it's a great pleasure to have you on the show. And Matt has been a key member of the IFA team for 10 years, building extensive relationships with all three segments of the IFA: membership, franchisors, franchisees, and suppliers. During that time, he's held a number of roles, including communications director, vice president of public affairs, chief of staff to the CEO, and senior vice president, public affairs. In 2017, was promoted to senior vice president of government relations and public affairs and leadership role until recently, or last year, when he was promoted to CEO. Is that correct?
That is Matt? Correct.
So welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ray.
Well, with all that, my next question is, when do you run for public office?
Never. Thank you. I don't know. Have you noticed the Congress's approval rating is something like 10%? So hopefully I'm doing a little bit better in the franchise sector.
I would certainly say, and from the applause you received in San Diego at the IFA show, I would say it's significantly higher than that. So let's get right down to some of the questions that we wanted to ask you. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of opinions out there. We've got kind of the economy in flux right now. How do you see the state of franchising today with us coming out of this COVID and all the craziness going on with interest rates?
Yeah, so I always think that franchising is, does a little bit better than, everybody else, right? And it's not to say there aren't issues in franchising. We're not seeing, the impact of the labor markets or, supply chain issues or, the impact of inflation right now, or even during COVID that, some franchises didn't, go out of business. But it's like relative to what? Relative to, kind of going it your alone, as a non-franchise, small business, or, even some of the, the larger companies that are seeing, major issues right now that are, all corporate entities. I think you're seeing a lot of that in what's going on with Starbucks and others on the union side. That's a reflection oftentimes of, cultural issues. And I think for franchising, it's uniquely situated always in the economy. And it's why it's so special. Of course, I'm a little bit biased given, I'm paid to be somebody that talks a great game about franchising, but the data always backs it up. too. And again, we're not perfect. There are issues in franchise. We got to work on ourselves. And not every system is created equal. But this year, we're going to do well. There's going to be a contraction in credit markets, and obviously everything costs more, and it's harder to find people than it's ever been before, or retain people. But relative to what is, I think, is try to always keep that in perspective.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting, because you asked Ray and I before the show, what's one of your biggest challenges? Is it staffing? And we both said, yeah. And, I go through my local community and we're like, oh my gosh, they're closed today. And you watch a lot of even the local businesses have had to really turn back their hours of operations. And maybe they're not open on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. They're only open on Thursday through Sunday for restaurants, right? And so everybody's feeling it. They just might not be talking about it.
Yeah, undoubtedly. So we did a survey earlier in the early spring, and the number one issue facing franchisees and franchisors is the availability of labor. And so I think that is something that there's no silver bullet to solve for either. From a lot of my background is in public policy. There's not just a magic wand that can be waved here. People were complaining about the unemployment insurance, and, too much money in the given to consumers, and all these things I think add up. But the one thing that we've been encouraging our members to focus on is focus on the things that you can control, and the things that you can control are really listening to the needs of your employees, and kinds of non-monetary compensation, I think, is something really important right now. And recognition in the workplace. That's a lot of what's going on with some of the issues that these larger companies I think we've seen, and that's something that's really powerful in the franchise model. Is local owners are in touch with their employees in a much more direct way than some distant corporation will ever be.
Yeah, I can't agree with that more. That's great. Ray, you probably have a lot to say to that, right?
I do. And I feel sorry for any organization that's trying to create a good culture now, and because they're realizing how important it is. And you only realize that when you have difficulty finding employees. And it's really difficult to just start up a good culture. You've got to really have a legacy of going back a long time. And I think both Kristin and I have that legacy. We have, personally, I have employees that have been with me since I started, 19 years ago. So it's, that's a good thing. And for us to just now, or I should say us, some companies just trying to say, okay, I recognize the need of good culture. How do I do that? And if you have to ask, you probably
it's too late.
It's too late.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Matt, you mentioned something about Starbucks and culture, and that brings us, and we talked about unions a little bit. So that kind of brings me to my next question of the FAST Act and the update in California. Can you tell me a little bit about that and what you think the significance of the defeat of David Weil's nomination is going to have to do with this whole outcome?
Yeah, I'll take a step back first, and then try to tie all these different fights that we've been engaged in from a lobbying perspective at IFA together. I always like to start with the why, right? Yeah. Why are these things so important to the franchise business model?
Sure. And can I interrupt you one moment, because I want to remind you that a lot, and I should have said this in the beginning, many of our listeners don't even own franchises yet. So we might even want to start at that point of why this is such a big deal.
Yeah. So the essence of a franchise is, it's two separate entities, right? You've got somebody or a company that's created a brand, and, they have certain obligations, to protect the brand, to grow the brand, to support the existing franchisees. And, of course, the franchisees have their own set of obligations, right? Following the playbook. But at the top of that list is, in the area where a franchise owner has the greatest amount of flexibility and autonomy, is around employment and labor and the wages, the benefits, the scheduling that they're going to set for those individual employees. And of course, the ability to adjust that to local market conditions is a key component of how, the franchisee is ultimately going to, take a profit out of that business. A lot of the other costs are going to be somewhat fixed in terms of, what else is in that business. So when we talk about these labor fights that we've been having with unions, unions have wanted for years, we're going on decades now, to commingle the franchisee and the franchisor as one business, right? For the purposes of union organizing. There's nothing wrong with union organizing and the right of employees to unionize. They can do that, at any business under, longstanding federal labor law. The issue that we have with this issue with unions is they have for decades been trying to turn every individual franchise owner into, a large corporation, so that in effect, the franchise business model would not exist in the way that it allows, a local owner to own and operate in their community and monetize that investment. So this whole concept of joint employment or joint employer that IFA has really led the charge to fight and prevent from happening. And it's been a fight that for years was happening at the federal level from 2013 through about 2017. Of course, the Trump administration came in, and whatever you think about the Trump administration, and people think a lot about it or not a lot about it, depending on your perspective, they did do a lot of good things on labor policy in terms of rolling back some of these rules and regulations that were in place. But the net effect of that has been that these fights have gone more to the state or local level. And even with the Biden administration coming in and saying, we want to be the most pro-union administration in history, there are limitations to what they can do given a 50-50 US Senate. So even getting people confirmed like David Weil, who is one of the intellectual sort of developers or godfathers of this joint employer policy. And he's been pushing it through his writings and academic work and then policy when he served in the Labor Department position in the previous administration. So IFA led a campaign to defeat Weil's nomination to the US Senate, which was successful about 2 months ago. And that was a big repudiation of some of these policies. You mentioned the FAST Act, Kristin, which is a joint employer proposal in the California legislature that we're currently fighting. And it is specifically tailored only to the limited or counter service, essentially the fast food industry. Yep. So it would only apply to an owner of a franchise restaurant that serves food at a counter or via takeout, and only to a brand or a franchise owner that's a part of a brand with 30 or more locations nationwide. So it's very clearly focused on, the fast food industry, but the bill proponents have said this is the first sector that we want to go after, right? This is the largest sector within franchising, but is not the only sector that they seek to target. And the other aspect of this bill, which is, arguably more egregious than even creating joint liability between franchisees and franchisors, is a sector bargaining council. So this would be a group of 11 unelected bureaucrats that the governor would name, who would set wages outside the legislature's authority for the businesses in that category. So wages and benefits would essentially be set by this unelected body. It's a concept called sectoral bargaining that's prevalent in Germany and other European countries. And essentially, it's going to take orders from SEIU, which is the largest labor union that's focused on organizing in the franchise sector, and really been focused on this fight for 15 in a union movement that's been targeting McDonald's and other fast food franchises. This is a way of organized labor saying, we can't do what we want to do through Congress or through the Biden administration. So we're going to go to the most pro-labor state in the country and give them what we think is the easiest pathway for us to enact the changes we need to most effectively unionize the fast food restaurant sector.
Well,
and so it's passed. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, that really kind of ties the hands of the business owner. And I've kind of heard that called as the business owner now becomes more of a manager, right, of your business. You're no longer the owner, right? Because things are now given to you to execute rather than you defining what it is that you want to do within the business.
Yeah, I mean, think about it this way. If you're the brand and you're now liable for the labor and employment of the franchisees, which used to be liable for that, what are you going to do? You're going to take over control of those decisions, right? You're going to set the wages. You're going to set the schedules. And, what happens to the, man or woman that owns the franchise? They're effectively a manager or a middle manager.
Yeah.
And then I think, rolling the tape forward a little bit more is what happens at the end of that franchise agreement, right?
Yes.
So maybe the franchise agreement was coming up for renewal in a year. Is the franchisor going to decide to renew under these, bizarre new terms? No, they're probably going to operate a corporate location. And so what does that do to franchising in the future in the state of California? It probably goes away. Certainly no emerging brand that's not in California today is going to enter that market, despite the fact that it's, one of the largest markets in the world. And if they do, they're probably going to do it as a corporate location, taking away the opportunity for some local person to own and operate a business.
Well, and as it stands, so many people don't want to do, myself included, business in California because labor is such a tough, labor and work comp are really difficult laws to follow there. So it really is a big deal. And I think it's important for people who are listening out there, if you own a franchise and you're not part of IFA, this is certainly an educational conversation for you to understand and know what it is that Matt and IFA does for you behind the scenes. That, Ray and I have been members for years, and we didn't, for a lot of years, understand that this is what these guys do. With our memberships, they're out fighting the fight for us so that we don't necessarily have to get involved. I will also say on the flip side of that, though, right, Matt, that, we all have to go out to our local person and say, hey, we need you fighting for us too, because just like small business, franchise has issues that we need our local governments to help with as well.
Yeah. And so if you want to be just aware of issues that are happening locally or nationally in franchising, you can join, Franchise Action Network, which is a great way to stay on top of the public policy issues. If you're in California, you want to learn more about this issue, you can go to stopab257.com, and you can see a bunch of the media coverage of this and some of the advertising and other grassroots activity that we've generated to mobilize. It's really an entire franchising fight. While right now it only impacts, restaurants, we have had a lot of other non-restaurant franchisees get engaged and speak to their legislators. So it's a constant education effort here that we are engaged in at IFA.
Very good. Well, we are going to break briefly with that and take a commercial. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the mission of IFA, both today and as we move forward.
Hey, franchise owners, how's your local marketing? Do you feel like you could use some help keeping up with your social media posts and comments and reviews? Do you wonder if you could be doing more to attract local customers? Are you able to identify new move-ins to your local area? At Westvine, we help franchisees like you reach more local customers through digital marketing. With daily monitoring, creative content, and ad placement, and customer data intelligence, we'll get your business in front of the people who want your products or services. We also work with franchisors who need an agency to handle the digital marketing for all of their locations. If you're ready to reach more local customers, give us a call at 805-265-5440 or visit us at westvine.com. That's 805-265-5440 or westvine.com.
And welcome back. We are here with Matt Holler, the president and CEO of the International Franchise Association, and you are listening or watching us and Pillars of Franchising. Boy, Elizabeth, we miss you today. Welcome back. So Matt, tell us a little bit about the mission. Obviously, the mission today is to protect and enhance and promote franchising nationwide, and obviously getting into international stuff as well. Where do you see you going, or the association going here in the near future?
Yeah, so I think we're always going to be engaged in these public policy fights we were talking about in the last session, and that's of course a lot of my background. It will always be, an advocate for protecting or promoting public policy that helps make franchising better or easier to access or preserves the business model. I think where we see the organization going and investing in the future is that second and third pillar of, to use your guys' slogan, the third pillar of our mission statement, right? So enhance and promote. And what does that really mean today, where we sit in 2022 and beyond? People have never craved professional development and education more than they do right now. And as we were talking also a little bit in the last segment, it's a function of recruitment and retention, and how do you invest in your top performers? So IFA during the pandemic, we really focused not just on advocacy for things like PPP, but also convening and doing so we're on Zoom here in a way where people consume information in such a different way than they had before. And that creates an incredible opportunity for us as an organization to educate in both an informal and a formal way about how to do franchising for brands that are coming to IFA and want to learn, from the best and the brightest in franchising, as well as for people already in the business model in different disciplines, whether you're an operations person or a marketing person or a lawyer or a technology person, development and sales. There's lots of convening and learning within those different disciplines. So we're making a tremendous amount of investment in education ourselves and partnerships with, you mentioned the University of Denver, the Lineker School that's coming online. There's also the University of Louisville. You mentioned Palm Beach Atlantic and others. Yep. So developing partnerships with those organizations, as well as really improving the technology and the learning management platforms that IFA's Certified Franchise Executive Program is conducted on. And then investing in our own technology for us to engage and convene our members at all three legs of the stool: the franchisors, the franchisees, and the industry suppliers. So you'll continue to see a lot more from IFA in that education area. And then, beyond that is events, right? So events are still a critical, component. You talked about San Diego, where we had our convention. We'll continue to try to grow those events, but I also think partnering with other organizations to bring IFA content to them and IFA leaders to them. So we've launched a new partnership with an organization called Franchise Update Media. We wrapped up a consumer experience conference earlier this month in Atlanta. And we're also working collaboratively with that organization on a leadership and development sales conference in October. Expos will continue to be a big component, not just here domestically, but also internationally, working with our expo partners, MFB. And so those are some examples of where we're taking IFA in the future on the enhanced side. And then of course promoting the business model, right? So that's really the work of our foundation and telling the franchise story. That helps us, I call it, condition the environment for how policymakers and the media, people that influence how our business model and our members are perceived. That's really important work. And we're focused on putting a lot of resources into promoting different affinity groups. So women and minorities, veterans, and even within those groups, there are programs that we've developed over the last year. This Black Franchise Leadership Council that we launched. We recently launched a Hispanic Latino Leadership Council and a Pride Council. So again, it's a function of convening and programming. And then lastly, research. I think more research will come from the IFA that we're developing to give greater credibility to the arguments that we're making in public policy, but also, help with franchise development and other people that are thinking about getting into franchising.
I think that's awesome. I'll tell you, as I got into doing consulting, one of the things that really frightened me was not being required to have a certification to sell franchises. And so I wound up partnering with Sabrina Wall at Franchise Broker Association because I really enjoyed the technology and really the passion for making sure that you understood completely and thoroughly the process. And when I bought my franchise, I had a really great broker with Franchise, Britt Schroeder. And I think that's so important. It's a critical part when people get into franchising. I mean, to get into it, you have to make sure you really understand it. And not always do the development people go through all of the things that a consultant might. So if I had a wish, that would be one piece where the consultants really kind of tied into this whole puzzle, so to speak. So, but that's my own private wish.
Look,
not private, right?
Yeah. Look, there are people out there that just want to make the sale, and that is not something that's going to help franchising over the long term or help a brand over the long term.
Yeah.
And so it's something that we're focused on at the IFA. It's certainly something that a number of state regulators are very focused on right now. And look, at the end of the day, shining a brighter light on those brands that are doing things the right way and demonstrating that their franchisees are profitable is really important. And the more we can help at the federal level and the state level and with our own platforms and education, the better it's going to be for the business model over the long term.
Absolutely. Ray, you had a question, right?
Yeah, one of the questions that's come up recently in some of our conversations is how private equity firms are impacting the franchise model.
Yeah, well, there's a tremendous number that are involved now in franchisors and franchisees, as well as in the supplier space. So, I think they see that, it's a stable return on capital, which is a really good thing, right? So I don't, some people have a visceral reaction when you mention private equity. I'm not one of those people, but I think just like, a franchisor shouldn't be looking for franchisees that are getting into this for the wrong reasons, or a franchisor shouldn't be getting into franchising, for the wrong reasons to, get a quick, return. I think for the same reason, franchisors need to be mindful of finding the right partner in terms of a firm, a private equity or venture capital firm that understands franchising and understands the importance of franchisees in the franchisor-franchisee relationship. And that is the most important thing. There are some wonderful private equity firms that are involved in the franchise model today. And there are others that are newer to the game. And part of my job is to go educate them about the work of the IFA. Not just what we do to protect franchising and their potential investments, but also the educational work that I touched on earlier, so that those principals or investors are, involved in understanding, why, a franchisor shouldn't sell 100 locations, right out of the gate, because they're not going to have the infrastructure to support that and make sure those franchisees are profitable. And, there's going to be a cost associated with setting up, a franchisor infrastructure, not just selling, unit count. And so that's an important educational piece for us.
That's
One
awesome.
of the things, I was in a conversation with my son this morning, who's also part of my business. We were talking about the stability of the business, and we've gone through two major things, and that was the downturn in 2008 and then the COVID thing. And we've managed to survive. So the stability of this franchise and the franchising model altogether is really strong. That's probably why a lot of the private equity firms are looking towards that, because of the stability. But one of the other questions, I'm going to change gears on you. What does IFA offer a veteran?
So we have a program called VetFran. VetFran has been around for 31 years now. And what VetFran does, so there are 600 or so brands that are members of VetFran. And to be a member of VetFran, it means you're offering a discount off of an initial franchise fee and oftentimes other programs, lending programs that are better terms with lending partners in terms of access to capital. So that is a lot of what IFA, offers. There's a website, vetfran.org, that veterans visit in robust numbers. We partner also with, a lot of military service organizations like Military Officers Association and others to raise awareness. And like I mentioned, in terms of diversity and things like that, convening people, veterans learning from veterans. And so that's a big platform for us in our veteran work. And veterans do very well typically in a franchise because there are a lot of similarities from military service in terms of, working in a team, following a playbook that translate quite well. It doesn't mean it's automatic, but that is something that we found. 14% of franchises are owned by veterans. And veterans are only 6% of the U.S. population. So.
And Matt, you have a new leader of VetFran, right? I believe I met someone in San Diego.
Yeah, we have a VetFran program manager. He's a Marine. His name's Eric Johnson. You can find him on the VetFran website if you want to contact him, or any of your listeners or viewers want to get a message into Eric. He's a great guy.
Yeah, he was very kind, very excited about what it is that he's doing. So listen, I really appreciate you taking time out right before your vacation weekend starts to join us here on Pillars of Franchising. And I really, as a franchisee, and I know I can speak on Ray's behalf here, we do appreciate all the work that you guys do because, I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that we don't even realize until it boils up and hits the news. And then we're like, oh, wow, is that really happening? If we get updates at convention and things of that nature. And after going to IFA in San Diego, I'll certainly be way more involved. And it's so exciting to see all of the inclusive groups that you have now. We just had the Pride, IFA, the Pride Council was on. VetFran is one that I know Ray's going to be working on, and we've had a couple of the others. So very, very exciting to see all of the different ways that you are reflecting the community that we all operate in. So thank you for that. Thank you for your time. And tell us, how do people get in touch with you and or IFA in general, should they have any questions, concerns, or interests?
Yeah, you can find anything about IFA at franchise.org. That's our universal website. And if you have questions for me, my contact information is on the IFA website. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter, and look forward to any of your viewers that may have questions or thoughts about the IFA getting more involved.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful and safe holiday weekend.
Enjoy your Independence Day, Kristin and Ray. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And we'd like to thank all of you for joining us on the show today with our guest, Matt Holler of the International Franchise Association. Please be sure to like, share, and comment on this episode. Thank you to Jerry Akers, our $1 Million. What? Are you interrupting me?
I think Elizabeth wants to talk.
Okay, Oz, you're interrupting me again. You have to the count of 3 and I'm closing us out. 1, 3. All right, we're going. Again, we'd like to thank you all for joining us on the show today with our guest, Matt Holler of the International Franchise Association. Be sure to like, share, and comment on this episode. Thank you to Jerry Akers, our $1 Million mentor, who could not be with us today, and obviously all of our other fabulous mentors who are off on vacation, for their insight and wisdom. Thanks to Fred McMurray, our producer. I am Kristin Selmeczy, your other $1 Million mentor. And Ray, thank you for sticking around today. I'm so glad you didn't leave me alone as well. Together, we are your source for franchising success. This has been Pillars of Franchising. Happy 4th of July. Be safe, be well, and the dream starts here. We'll see you next week, Thursday, 4 p.m. Central Time.
Franchising.